Right, so hello, I am finally doing the most anticipated video of the whole year. I know the lighting is not the greatest, but I tried filming in natural light and it's just so gloomy, so I'm filming in the evening with artificial light. It is what it is. So before we get to the best books of 2020, I'm going to talk about 5 honorable mentions. They're all 4 stars, but just 4 stars that really stood out to me. So I'm going to talk about them very quickly, mostly just mention them. So here I have my list. And the first book is I'll Be Gone in the Dark by McNamara. It is a true crime novel about the Golden State Killer, and it is very well written. I would very much recommend it. Then we have I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Iain Reid. This book made me realize that I can enjoy reading horror. Then we have Born a Cry by Trevor Noah. Trevor Noah is so funny. This is his memoir that focuses on his life before he came to the United States, so his childhood. And I think he will be coming out with a new memoir in 2021, so that's very exciting. If you're going to read Born a Crime, definitely listen to the audiobook. He narrates it, he does all the accents, he is a polyglot, so he knows a lot of different languages, so it is an amazing audiobook. Then we have Jinyoung, Born 1982 by Cho Namjoo. It is a South Korean novel, very short, very feminist, and it really kind of throws a punch, so I would definitely give it a shot. And lastly, we have The Five by Hallie Rubenhold. It is about the 5 victims of Jack the Ripper, but it does not focus on Jack the Ripper at all, pretty much. It only focuses on his victims and how most people for a long time thought they were all prostitutes, but that's not true. Some of them were, some of them weren't. Hallie Rubenhold really focuses on those women's lives and who they were, and that they were real people. If you're at all interested in like life of poor women in London in the 19th century, this is just a great non-fiction to read. So now we can start with the official ranking. I have 10 books to talk about. Since it is not a review video, I will try to condense my thoughts as much as possible, so this video is not 40 minutes long. And as always, I will be looking at my laptop. So on number 10 we have something that I kind of was going back and forth whether to put this book on this list, because it is a 4-star. It is the only 4-star on this whole list, but I do think it deserves that spot. So on number 10 we have The Lonely City by Olivia Laing. It is a really hard book to categorize because it is part memoir, part biography of different artists who live in New York in the 20th century, part art criticism. It's a lot of things, but it's really good. Each chapter focuses on different artists, so it kind of feels like each chapter is like a separate essay, and it is. I gave it only 4 stars because some chapters were better than others. I think some artists were a lot more interesting than others, but overall it is a really great book. It is about loneliness. It is about how the life of these artists influenced their art. It's very well written. It really doesn't read like a textbook about, you know, different artists and their artwork. It's very readable. I really like Olivia Laing's writing style. So if you have any interest in, you know, art at all, I would definitely recommend it. Then we have the last non-fiction on this list. So on number 9 we have Know My Name by Chanel Miller. I hate this phrase. I hate hearing it and I hate saying it, but this book is so important. It really is as good as everyone says it is. It is about Chanel Miller, who was sexually assaulted on Stanford campus, and she was the Emily Doe in the Turner versus People trial. I'm from Poland, so I didn't actually know a lot about this trial. If you know anything about it, you know that Brock Turner got only 6 months in, I think not even prison, I think in jail, yes. So he got 6 months, but you know, he got released after 3 months on, you know, good behavior. And Chanel Miller published her victim impact statement on BuzzFeed in 2016, and in a few days it got millions of views. I have to say, it took me a while to finish this book because it is hard to read. It is kind of exhausting to read, but it's really good. It talks about how victims and abusers are kind of portrayed in media, and you know, those differences, how, you know, Brock Turner was portrayed as this, you know, athlete that, you know, his future is being ruined because of, you know, this trial and this the fact that he had to go to jail, and how Chanel was portrayed as this like party girl. And it's frustrating. It really is. It really delves into the frustration about the American legal system. Her case was very important because it kind of inspired changes in California laws, and because of that case, I think the definition of sexual assault was kind of got more broad because of that case, I think. And the judge that sentenced Brock Turner got recalled, so he's not a judge anymore. So it is a very important case, it is a very important memoir, and if you are prepared to read something, so hard, I think it's really, really worth it. And Chanel Miller actually majored in creative writing, so she is just an amazing writer. So, number 8 we have a modern classic, and that is Slaughterhouse 5 by Kurt Vonnegut. I was shocked that I liked this book as much as I did. This book is weird. This book is so meta. It is a semi-autobiographical book. It talks about the bombing of Dresden. The format of this book is really weird. Even though it's kind of fiction, the author comes in here and there and comments on some events. It's also about aliens, it's about time traveling. This book is really one-of-a-kind experience, so even if it doesn't sound like something you would like, I would give it a shot because it's such a unique book. And it's an anti-war novel, it does not glamorize the war at all. So yeah, on number 8 we have Slaughterhouse 5 by Kurt Vonnegut. Then we have a book I listened to on audiobook, which is The Other Bennet Sister by Janice Hadlow. And it is a Pride and Prejudice retelling from Mary's point of view. It is very well written. It is just delightful, really. If you like Pride and Prejudice, I really think you would like it. It's about personal growth, it's about finding yourself. I personally didn't love the second half of the book. I found the first half to be a lot more interesting. In the second half we are introduced to the love interest, and I really could do without it. It has some surprisingly interesting philosophical discussions. Yeah, it's great, because sometimes you read a Pride and Prejudice retelling and characters seem so out of character, and here I really felt like Janice Hadlow got the characters from Pride and Prejudice right. Oh right, I forgot to say, Know My Name, Slaughterhouse 5, and The Other Bennet Sister, those were all 4.5 stars, and now we have the last 4.5 star, which is The Woman in White by Wilkie Collins. After that we will have only 5 stars. The Woman in White, oh my god, I talked so much about it in my reading vlog. It is about a guy who meets in the middle of the night in London. He meets a woman who is dressed in white, and she asks for directions, he gives her directions, and later he finds out that this woman escaped from an asylum. This book is so full of twists and turns. It is so entertaining. It's pretty long, but yeah, I kind of flew through it. I was really surprised about what this book contained, because I have this kind of expectations about what I can expect from a Victorian novel, and this really exceeded my expectations, really surprised me. I don't want to spoil anything, but yeah, there were some events that happened that was like, what? The only reason I talked about it before, the only reason why it is a 4.5 stars is because in the middle, there's 100 pages that I thought was a little bit unnecessary and not surprising at all, but then we kind of go back to being surprised with each chapter. So this is just very entertaining, well written, has some interesting characters. Yeah, if you like mysteries, I personally am not a huge fan of gothic fiction, but this is a sensational novel, and it was my first time reading this kind of book, and I loved it. So on number 5 we have Fingersmith by Sarah Waters. Sarah Waters just writes amazing historical fiction. Oh, I don't have much space on my camera. Okay, let's just fly through the next few books. Yeah, honestly, if you enjoy historical fiction, very well researched historical fiction, also with a lot of twists and turns, I think this one had a lot of more twists than Tipping the Velvet, which was one of my favorite books of 2018. I personally like Tipping the Velvet a little bit more, but this was also great. I love that Sarah Waters pretty much always includes some kind of female-female relationship in her books. And yeah, I don't have any critique, so 5 stars, read it. On number 4 we have a graphic novel, and it is Woman World by Aminder Dhaliwal. This book, you have to kind of not lower your expectations, but know what you're going to get with this book, because it is about a world where men kind of went extinct, and it is a world where only women live, and there's no kind of big story. It's kind of little vignettes from this world. We're following this small village, so you're getting to know like a few characters a little bit more. It's so funny, it's full of jokes. There's no like overarching story. It's just like you have 2 pages about like a particular kind of scene, and then on the next page it's different characters, and it's so funny. It's just hilarious. So if you need like a feel-good, pick-me-up kind of graphic novel, this one is great. Very inclusive, very kind of feminist, includes some, LGBT plus characters, so. Then we have another graphic novel, also 5 stars. On number 3 we have March by John Lewis and illustrated by Nate Powell and Andrew Iain. This is a graphic novel about John Lewis's life, his childhood when he met Martin Luther King, and about the sit-in protests in the 1960s. It is just great. I think not only the story is great, but the art style really complements the story. There are 2 more volumes. I still haven't read them because graphic novels are expensive, but I really love the first volume. Okay, so I have to say, the rest of the books, when it comes to rankings, they could be a little bit interchangeable, but the first 2 novels that I'm going to talk about are definitely my favorite books I read in 2020, and I have like definite number 1 and number 2 spot, but they're both just amazing. So on number 2 we have The Watchmaker of Filigree by Natasha Pulley. This is also a hard book to categorize because it is historical fiction, but it's also, it has a hint of mystery, and also it has elements of something called steampunk? I think that's what it's called. It's like a subgenre of science fiction, but it's not overwhelming. It's kind of just a hint of steampunk. So it is about this guy who suddenly finds a watch on his bed one day, and he doesn't know where it comes from, but this watch in a way protects him from a bombing that happens at his work. So he survives the bombing because of that watch, and he starts kind of investigating where this watch came from, because it did save him from, a catastrophe. It includes LGBT characters, it includes some Japanese characters, there's some, elements of Japanese culture. A few chapters are set in Japan. I have to say this was very well researched. On the last chapter she talks about all the research she's done. She actually, I think, visited Japan to do some research on Japanese culture. She definitely did some research about, 19th century London, because it takes place in 1893, 1884 mostly. It's so weird because you have some scenes from like the underground, like there was an underground railroad, like a subway, and it's so weird because you're like 19th century, a subway, what? But it was there, I think, in the 1860s. Like in the second half of the 19th century there was a subway in London, and so weird. I will be screaming from rooftops about this book from now on. This and Know My Name were 2 last books I read in 2020, and what a great way to finish such a terrible year with a 4.5 star and 5 star, and more people need to know about this book because it is stunning. And the last book I would like to talk about, number 1, my favorite book of 2020, is a classic, and it is The House of Mirth by Edith Wharton. I read this book quite a few months ago now, and I still do not know how to talk about it. It is so well written. The characters in this book are so complex. They can be unlikable. They make mistakes, but they're so human. I love how Edith Wharton talks about kind of the dynamics of a conversation when you kind of want to say something, but then kind of the atmosphere changes and you're like, oh, never mind this, like I can't say that anymore. And how it's hard to have, genuine conversations with people. And don't be fooled, this book has no mirth in it. This book is depressing. I cried so hard in I think it was not the last chapter, but the chapter before that, I just bawled my eyes out. So I would really hope more people would read this book, or just in general would give Edith Wharton a chance. Yeah. So that's it. That's all of my favorite books of 2020. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you found some books that you are now interested in and would like to read based on my recommendations. And yeah, see you next time. Bye!